Everyone, welcome back to another UU video. It's been a minute. We'll be talking about some SCL2 UU stuff. The draft for this happened last Sunday, and usually there's like a 1 week break between the draft and week one, just to let things settle for PRs to come out, which is why we're here. So we'll talk about UU a little bit. We'll get to that in a second, but before that, I want to introduce my buddy, my partner in crime. We got IP here with us. Say what's up.
What's up, folks? Dude, I just smacked the shit out of my arm.
Oh no, you're hurting yourself little by little.
I know.
It's tough.
Yeah, I love pain.
Anyways, so you'll see like the whole draft over here, and Avarice has been nice enough to separate potential UU players slash helpers. So I guess before we get to like our individual rankings, we've done it a little differently. You'll see what I mean. We could just go team by team and just give our general thoughts. So first off, we've got the champions from last year, the Orange Islanders, who retained PDT since he's had a hell of a year. And you can see here he's got a ton of support. Like he's got Sage, Mence, Avarice. Like these are all big UU names.
Yeah, well, Mens should definitely get nuked. He doesn't play UU anymore. He just gets carried, so...
It's been a minute, since I've seen him play.
Yeah.
He's good. He knows
besides,
his stuff.
No, he's definitely a good player. I troll. But besides that, yeah, they have some of the biggest support out of all the teams, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Like in terms of just
and the most
raw
mainers,
UU help,
say.
the most mainers, exactly. That's what I was gonna say. Like you look at the rest of the like supporting cast that all the starters have, and clearly this team stands out. That's a good sign. It's a good sign. And PDT's had a hell of a year. Like if we look at, for example, UUSD records, like I think he went 6-1 in SS. It's not updated, but 6-1 in SS, which is nothing to scoff at. He also went 7-2 in UUPL of this year, so definitely on like a hot streak. I think he's like one of the more polarizing players to watch in this tournament.
For sure. That's what I was gonna say. He's always been like a hot and cold player, but I think this year especially is a standout year because I mean, we've both teamed with him a ton. I team with him in South too. He'll have like one good tour and then a couple bad ones, a couple good ones, but this year has felt like one of the most consistent ones where instead of going on like a hot and cold streak, he's just been pretty successful in SS as of far.
Yeah, absolutely tearing it up. Yeah, definitely looking at him, forward to him and his games this tournament. Because in game, in game he never disappoints the crowd. That's for sure.
Yeah,
his games
are
fun
one way or another.
One way or another, yeah. On to the next team. We got the Platoon with TDK at the helm, and he's got GXC, who's played UU, but I feel like TDK is going to be doing the brunt of the UU work here.
Yeah.
He kind of needs no introduction, right? Like, long time, solid UU player, yeah.
Yeah, anyone that knows UU knows who TDK is, and his support is definitely more lacking compared to other teams. And I mean, you have like Star, Gary, who just had the slam run.
Yep,
and
for sure.
Like Tony, like everyone can give input, but he's definitely lacking a more just like dedicated UU supporter than some other teams.
I don't think it'll come to bite him, too much because, like you said, he's got Gary, he's got himself, obviously, Tony. Like these are all like creative genes who come up with like some really cool in-game stuff, which is perfect for like a best of one scenario. You know what I mean? Anything to surprise your opponent and just take control for like the pivotal turns.
Yeah, they can all do that, and then TDK has been around for so long and played UU for so long too that regardless of having like dedicated support, he's just like, just from playing and experience, it already puts him like way above, or not way above, but noticeably above like some other people that are starting. So
definitely like a steadier sort of player compared to like some of the more like X Factor sort of guys that we have here,
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's a decent way to put it. Alright, next up we got the Dynamos with Soulwind and K-Steve. Soulwind has started in UU tours in the past, but this time around I think from the intel that we're getting, K-Steve is going to get a go at starting for now. which is exciting because I think in the past he's been more of like a support figure, right? You're at UUPLs and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, he's always been a builder, especially for the Jerk, or like TDK loves K Steve.
Mm-hmm.
So it was surprising to see. I think what happened is they drafted Solwyn because they wanted him to play UU, and then Solwyn basically just said, "Hell no, I'm not playing UU." So even Casey was surprised that he was gonna start.
Yeah,
But guess that's what happens. Sometimes you gotta flex your slots.
absolutely. And not to say K Steve's like, you know, a bad option, to be fair to him, because like he went 5-2 in the most recent UPL. So he's definitely competent. It's just that this 5-2 I think is one of few results to kind of be content, you know, regarding
Yeah, and
his
I think he
expectations.
struggled in Snake too. Like recently, like he had a good UPL because I teamed with him, and then he struggled recently in Snake to the point
Yeah.
where like I heard he like didn't really even want to keep playing.
Oh, that's not a good sign. But that's the vibe I've been getting about some UU players. You know, they just don't like the tier.
Yeah, it's
But
very like
it's a hit or
polarizing
miss.
right now. Yeah, yeah, hit or miss.
Yeah, definitely an X factor. It'll be interesting to see how he does because he's also like very what's the word? He'll surprise you in game with some of his risks. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
although I definitely think he needs to diversify his builds a little more.
for sure, for sure.
Um, at least going into like an official tournament because people here will definitely care more. And you know, there's some very K Steve trends that go on, like the bulk up conk and just like the rest Swampert every time. So I'm excited to see what he would bring or what he's gonna bring. Um, but yeah, definitely one of like the more how do you say this? Like one of the more less proven players, I guess, from the
Yeah,
pool.
I agree with them. Yeah, so we'll see how he does. He's definitely one to keep an eye on going forward. Next up, we've got the Terrors with Liss getting his starting opportunity, and Maru's there to back her up, just in case you know things don't go as planned. But to Liss's credit, she's been a long time, you know, UU presence. She has her own specific style when it comes to building, you know, which is respectable. Everybody needs, you know, their own niche in SS, and she definitely has her own. The one thing I would look out for with regards to her is just confidence in general, because that'll dictate
Yeah.
how well she does in this tournament. You know what I mean? That's gonna dictate her
No,
ceiling.
I definitely agree. Yeah, and I mean she just played for the Dragonaires and Snake, and I've seen both sides of her. Like I love working with Liz, but I know that she doesn't enjoy the tier, and like after games or weeks where she's like struggling to build or to get anything she likes, it can definitely affect her like confidence and her mood. And I mean that happens to
Mm-hmm.
everyone, right? It happened to me big time in UUPL.
Yeah,
Um, but it like for an official, it's definitely something that you got to try to overlook. Um, your like of the tier and what you like bringing and diversifying your stuff a little more. So
mm-hmm.
I definitely agree that her confidence and her mood is gonna be like the biggest kind of factor before she even starts playing on regarding on how she's gonna do for the season.
For sure, for sure. And Maru's no slouch. You know, he's done really well in UU tournaments in the past. On a bit of a cold streak recently, from what I've been seeing. But
Hmm.
there's no doubt that he's like a serviceable backup should they need it.
Yeah,
Honestly, not
I
a bad UU core, and they have, you know, they've outsourced support from certain people as well. So you know,
I
she's got people to talk to, which is
I
good.
think what I like, yeah, yeah, definitely. Like she Liz works with Umbria a lot too, so like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, she had the support is there, and I think what I like about this core too is that I think they're both very different players. Like Liz has her own comfort zone, and so does like Miro too. Like he
Mm-hmm.
definitely has his unique building style to him, and he is on a like somewhat cold streak, but I feel like that's the case for any player in SSUU. Like you're gonna be very hard fought to find anyone who's just like torn up SSUU consistently.
Yeah,
So
yeah. It's
to
kind of the ebb and flow of SS underused. You know,
yeah.
hard to stay at the top. But it's kind of segues into our next player. We've got the machines with Piff at the helm, and I mentioned the ebb and flow of staying at the top of SS Underused, and he's done wonders in that regard. As far as individuals are concerned, last year he had a hell of a run. This year he's remained very relevant. And yeah, honestly, like a nightmare to prep for because he can genuinely use anything really well.
Yeah, I agree.
I think we were talking about it before, where most of his success shines in like a best of 3 setting, right? Where he gets to he has more ability to outplay his opponent and engage in those mind games over like a 3-game setting. But in this tournament, in a best of 1, you can't really do that as easily. So it'll be interesting to see how he does with that in mind.
That's the main thing for me, and I know we talked about it briefly before the stream, but like I love Piff, and he's always like always been active in the community, always plays, always does well in individuals. The big thing for me is that individuals or in like team settings are different, and I know he went like 4-2 in UUPL, so he's been doing like well.
Yeah.
But I consider him much stronger in best of 3 settings than in best of 1, and I know most people would actually say the opposite. They'd be like, well, in best of 3 you can like prep more consistently for someone's style, because then Piff can just like pull out whatever in best of 1, and I agree. But the thing is, like, I think his run is just gonna depend on how he starts the tournament. Like, he definitely has the ability to start 2-0, 3-0 or whatever, and then keep that momentum going and make it like extremely hard for his opponents to just prep week in and week out. But then on the flip side, like if his opponents out prep him the first couple of weeks, then I'm just scared that it's gonna fall into like what has happened before for his team tours, you know?
Sort of like a streaky vibe is what I'm getting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. I think in terms of like even just builds and creativity, he's pretty underrated in that regard too. So it'll be fun to see what he turns out. Doug's there on his team too,
sure.
and he's like a decent UU player, like enough to test with and enough to run ideas by. So
yeah, I mean, I feel like Ducks always goes decently far into UU individuals, and
that too.
I didn't even mention Piv's creativity factor. Having someone that isn't scared to branch out and try new things in SS obviously goes in a long way, where matchup might dictate the game more than it might in other generations.
Definitely. And speaking of creativity, we've got 2 players who are at the forefront in that regard. We got of the Spartans. No. You said, "Oh no." We got Lily and Udon Girl. And Lily just won this year's ladder tournament, which
Tier leader supremacy.
If that doesn't show, that she enjoys this tier and loves this tier, I don't know what else will. Because who else grinds a ladder tournament? You know what I mean? Like, you have to enjoy the tier to an extent.
Yeah, dude, I hate ladder tours so much, but
insanity. I
know she is one of the people that, like me, we both enjoy the tier right now, and I know we've both had our phases where we don't enjoy it. And anyone that ladders for that tour for sure either just likes inflicting pain upon themselves just to participate in tours, or likes a tier. So
yeah, either or.
Yeah,
mate, I'm psyched to see how she'll do in this tournament, because it's been a minute since we've seen her play UU in this setting. Obviously, she was managing last year. I think the tournament before that, Snake 4 was her debut, which she did pretty well for.
4-5 or 5-4 or something, didn't it?
5-4, I think.
Yeah, I thought it was like right around even.
But really good for a debut. If you go even or slightly positive, like that's an achievement as a newcomer.
Yeah.
And she's gotten a lot of experience since then. So I see her as like a seasoned player now. So it'll be interesting to see how that all translates to this tournament. Udon Girl's, I think, the perfect complementary presence to have alongside Lily for that team, because she's got her own style of UU. She can give Lily really good tests, really good advice in the builder. Now, like, I don't think those styles clash at all. And should Lily in some universe, if she struggles, then Udon Girl's like the best backup you could ask for.
Yeah,
Because I
I
think
mean,
she's been
Udon
thriving
Girl.
in best of ones, right? As of late.
Yeah, she's been killing it in UUSD. And
UUSD
Lily's
she went
very
6 and
easy
1.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And Lily's very easy to work with too. Um, and I know some people find like Udon Girl's style kind of like repetitive. You know, like slap X
Specs
choice
1.
specs mons and
Yep.
then five more. But I mean, if it works, it works. And at least like Udon Girl, I'm an Udon Girl fan. Like she grinds, or at least used to, grind the ladder.
Hmm.
And Lily, like you said in the beginning, can also be a very creative player and builder. So I think they definitely have the potential to come up with stuff that can catch other people like off guard pretty well.
Yeah. It's a nightmare matchup for a best of one, for sure.
As long as she doesn't bring out the rats, she should be okay.
Yep. We'll see how she can control those impulses.
I swear, every single meta she tries to make it work, dude.
Look, man. It's just it was with us and more Pekka, you know.
Yeah,
It's
true.
just you got to do it sometimes. Anyhow, we got the Shoguns next. This is an interesting group of UU players. Crying has had some decent results in UU as of late. Really off-kilter building style that a lot of people don't necessarily agree with, but it undeniably gets results. Poek is no stranger to UU. He always makes an appearance for these, UU tournaments or UU team tournaments. Year in, year out. Raichi's, been involved with UU as well. I think the builds will be the main determining factor of how well Poek does, because obviously he's really good as a player. He can beat anyone, like the best of the best, but his builds might, or the builds that he's passed, might have something to, say to that.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm a huge Pollock fan. I think every time I see him play, I'm a fan of how he pilots and pivots things. Um, I'm a big fan of him as a player. He has experience, and yeah, I don't know if he's gonna take. Crying is a demon, dude. The
Yeah,
teams that I saw Crying bring, I I could not watch those teams like play. They were just like demonic. I would never want to play against Crying um in a best of one setting, like ever.
dude, for
So
sure. Yeah,
if Poe can like if he can come up with demonic things and then pass them to Poek and then Poek can pivot them well, this is like a nightmare core. And I know they also have like I think they had Cole on the team, don't they?
they do.
Am I
They
going
do.
crazy?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, so they have Cole, and Cole is like, he always
Creative
jokes
mind
around
with the
how
ages.
washed he is and how like he doesn't do anything, but he always does something, so he can give them
Yeah.
feedback too.
Definitely, definitely.
So if they can come up with some solid stuff, I would not want to face them in a best of one.
Hmm. I think you'll agree with me though. Like the team building is definitely the X factor here, right? Because everything
Yeah,
else is
for
like
sure.
kind of locked down. Like we know how
Yeah.
competent Poek is, etc. So
If
It'll
he
be-
gets good
yeah.
teams, then you could probably expect them to be at the top. I don't see
Oh,
why they
for
wouldn't.
sure. For sure, for sure. Yeah, he's that solid. He was runner-up in champs of last year as well. Almost won the whole thing. So he's
Yeah,
definitely he
gave
knows
up
what it's like. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gave up about some terrible Haxor's HO twice.
Oh man, don't give him Haxorus this tournament. Don't do it to him.
Oh boy.
Oh, look at this dynamic duo we got coming up from the Foxes. We got Highways and KM. Yeah, these two never disappoint in the builder.
No, they gave me nightmares week 4 last SCL when the sub
Dude.
DD Gara came up.
Oh
Oh
my,
my god.
that was a really good adaptation. But that's the thing, right?
Yeah, that
like
was.
both of them were always going to be on top of like the flavor of the week picks, in terms of whichever way the meta swing, which is really fun to spectate. Highways has been he's done really well for himself this year. Like I think in UUPL he went 7-2, I believe. Yeah, look at that.
Yeah, something
Best
crazy.
SS record. Yep. And he also won the UU Invitational, which happened recently. Albeit a lot of those victories didn't have much to do with the SS performances necessarily, but still he's been a creative SS mind. And he
Yeah,
definitely
he's-
deserves
he's-
the starter spot this year, I would say.
Yeah, I'm glad he's starting for starters because I think he deserved it last year too, but he's definitely more proven this year now.
For sure. For sure.
I know he's in a bit of a cold streak as far as SS goes. In the past, like, I don't know, 6, 7, something like that games.
Mm-hmm.
But like the playing capabilities are there. Obviously, he just won Invitational. He did really well in UPL.
Yep.
Um, and like we mentioned before, SS is just a really hard tier to be consistent in, or SSEU rather.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but both of these guys are extremely active. They're not scared to try new stuff out. They both build, and they're both UU mainers. So
Yeah. What more do you want?
I, I think the big thing is like predicting how Highways is gonna do when it comes to the game, because
Mm-hmm.
um, he's definitely gotten better. I just think some other players here have more of like a drive to actually make plays during the game, like at any point than Highways does. But if Highways plays as well as he did in some of his invitational games, then he should definitely do well.
Mm-hmm. I think if we're talking about X factors, which is kind of a common theme with a lot of these players, I would say it would be his in-game performance for sure. Because sometimes I'll watch his games and I'll see like certain risks pan out in game, which kind of gets me to start scratching my head. I won't really understand it. He can be erratic sometimes, but if he gets a hold on that, if he you know hones his risk taking, then I have no doubt that he can pull a positive record because he's capable of it. And the
Yeah,
building
for what
acumen is there, undeniably so.
yeah, for what it's worth, I think he's gotten much better at like the risk assessment and just managing like long-term planning too.
Yeah.
Um, the thing is, like, last year I might have given him like, I don't know, let's say just random number 5 out of 10 on that
Mhm.
front, and maybe this year he's at like 7 or so. But
Yeah. Out
you
of 10, you
still
mean,
like,
right?
yeah,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
out of 10, not out of 100. No, I'm kidding. You still have like a fairly competitive pool, and there's some people that I feel like always are willing to make more plays. Like I said before, like you got PDT, TDK, Pollock, and whatever.
Mhm.
So I think it just depends on, you know, like we said, his how he starts playing,
Yeah.
and if he's actually like at that 7, 8 or higher level for all the areas that he used to struggle in before. So
Mhm. Yeah, he's got to come roaring out of the gates, sure, to hang with the top dogs of the pool.
hmm
We're almost there. We got the Breakers next up. L Numbers is expected to start, and he has the support of Gandra, Punny, and Rob, all of whom he's incredibly familiar with. He's very comfortable with them.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, it's been a minute since we've seen Clark play UU, if I'm not mistaken. But last year in SCL, he had about the best debut a new player could ever want in a tournament because he went what 7-2
7-2,
last
yeah,
SCL.
finished at the top.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then he played World Cup, and I think he did pretty well there too, like 4 or 5-0 or something.
Mm-hmm. So you can see the progression. Like he's definitely been getting better and better as a player. You and I both know how what's the word indecisive how indecisive he can be in the builder.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
definitely he has to get a lock on that. But once he does, and if he proves that he can you know hold on to what he knows in this particular meta, then I wouldn't doubt him going positive again.
Yeah, I think the main thing for me regarding Clark, and I'm close, so I can say whatever I want about him, is the meta is much different now than it was last year. You had your
Yeah.
like dumb shit last year that was just like not balanced at all.
GMO,
And
Coma,
yeah,
etc. Yeah.
yeah, like that thing clicked. I always get the moves mixed up, Clanger Soul or whatever, one time,
Yeah.
and like legit
GG.
95% of teams like could not handle it. So you had like your HO to prep for, and then you had everything else that you still had to account for. So I feel like this meta is still kind of volatile, and there's still some matchup aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the part where I'm not obviously trying to talk shit about Clark, but the games that he played last SEL where he was not using like extreme play styles were definitely way shakier than when he was just sweeping with Como, or like the one game that he used stall or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the potential's there. We've seen it before. It's just how he's gonna adapt to this meta because I haven't seen him play in a year or longer. So.
Yeah, and that's the question mark for sure. Like how in tune he is with the tier as things stand.
Right.
Because if I'm not mistaken, like Punny and Rob, like Gondra as well, like they've played SSUU, but I'm not sure how much help they'll be in the builder, which is like the main question I have with this core. You know what I mean? Unless he's outsourcing help from somewhere, unless he has help in that regard, then ignore whatever I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean the thing is,
But
we both know how much effort he puts into his prep, so I'm sure that
yes, I'm sure he'll
he
figure it out.
definitely has the tools, yeah, to be happy.
Definitely.
If not, he'll definitely let his team know.
For sure. And we've got the last team. We've got the Gibles with a lot of considerably new UU faces. We've got Baby Scarm, who's expected to start. We have Ariana Grande, and we've got Prod. Yeah, Prod's played UU a bunch. I think he's, in terms of results, I think out of the bunch he has the most overall. I think he had like a 5th place champs ranking last year throughout like individuals. BB Scarm's right behind him. He had like a UU Open semis run this year. And Haryana's just been, a very positive presence in the UU community. And he knows what he's doing. But definitely, you can see that there's like a little less oomph from this particular team with regards to UU compared to the other slots. Which have history, which have backing, which have results of all sorts and kinds, Whereas this trio, like I have a lot of doubts when I look at this trio. Like seeing is believing. I have to watch their games from the first few weeks to truly be convinced. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think everyone's on that boat. Like, obviously they're all like good people, and good players too. But the roster just doesn't, at least as of right now, without watching them play, it's definitely like the weakest one for me. Like nothing, or well, maybe like bottom 2 or whatever. There's just like, compared to some other rosters, there's no like star power, knowing that like I would be able to, like if I'm down 5-4 in the week and then my UU slot needs to play, right? Yeah. Like it's definitely on the weaker side, and that's not to say that they can't do well, but then when you have like other teams, like we just talked about the Breakers, right? You had Clark going 7-2 last year. You have Punny, who's an excellent player. Gondra, Rob, like they need no introduction.
Yeah.
So there's like a lot of options that you have for UU, but in here it's just like there's no one that's started in officially in UU before. There's no one here besides like Prodigy that I would say consistently plays like SSUU, at least to my knowledge either. That doesn't mean they're not active or like laddering, playing some individuals, but they don't play it as much as some other starters might.
You're right.
So
by comparison,
I just don't think they have like the oomph, like you said, that some other teams might have.
I just hope that this trio isn't like a revolving door of like mediocre UU performances when we look back upon this tour. You know what I mean? Like that's like the last thing I'd want for this trio. They do have 3K to try to work something out in the midseason if that happens, but I mean, I wouldn't really focus. I mean, this is a separate thing, but I wouldn't really focus on UU with that 3K. You know what I mean? Since they have 3 players who have been handpicked for that tier.
Yeah.
So
I mean, they do have.
There's pressure on them to make it work, for sure.
Yeah, they have some time to make it work. And if not, then yeah, that 3K is always there. I mean, you have some players like Liam, Shiba, etc. that like a lot of people thought that should have gotten drafted, but aren't. Yeah, like I said, I think for me it just depends. Like there's nothing really making them stand out from other teams. So yeah, and then someone just said also in your chat, like, it's probably even a real UU player. Doesn't he play like Ubers now or something?
Maybe not. I know he's been around. I know he's been around.
Oh, actually, I'm getting it confused with someone else, but yeah, I don't know. Like I said, there's just nothing that differentiates this team or any of these 3 in an official setting from everyone else that's starting.
There's a lot more convincing to be had.
Yeah.
From this group. So we'll see how it goes. I'll scroll down the thread a little bit. You'll see that people have, or just Piff, I guess, he's done his power rankings from 1 to 10. And I was gonna say, like, it's kind of tough to rank this pool from 1 to 10 because of how deceptively competitive it is. I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
you'll agree with me. So we've done a little different. We've done something differently. We've split it up into tiers, which I think is a little more loose, but also it makes sense from our point of view, and we'll get into it. So we mentioned TDK and Poek right before. Super stable. They've had the history of playing in these tournaments, so nerves are not likely to be a factor. Um, they're likely to have the necessary amount of building support, so there aren't really too many question marks here, which
Yeah.
would convince you against the thought of them going positive in this tournament. So in my eyes, I'm sure in your eyes as well, they're pretty much locks to go positive. Like that's what I would expect
Yeah.
from them.
I definitely agree. Like you said, they have the experience, and nerves play a big factor,
Mm-hmm.
especially in officials. Like you can have someone like, let me look at the pool, like Highways, for example, that might
Yeah.
not have played an official before, but has done well in other tours.
Mm-hmm.
But when you throw them in an official setting and something's actually like at stake, then nerves get to you, right? But TDK and Poke have both been mainstays. They're more than good enough to perform, as everyone knows.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as they get like actually good teams and proper support, I don't think anyone would argue that they're not a stronger player than other players in the pool. So
Mm-hmm. You'll notice that we have a lot of people in tier 2, which might seem odd because only so many people can go positive in a tournament like this one. So I think tier 2 would be the level that we would define as going either slightly positive or just treading water, going even or something. But definitely all these players have potential to put up overwhelmingly positive records at the same time. You know what I mean? So like the potential is there, but I think all these names are just really really close to each other. Like they're all on one level, in my opinion, because they each
yeah,
have their individual strengths. Whether it be recent results, or creativity in the builder, or being a nightmare to prep for. You know, everybody has their own sorts of pros and cons, which kind of balance each other out on this level, in my opinion.
yeah. I think you did a good job at explaining it. I would see this tier for me, like you said, as every any like two or three players from here, um, could end up as top three in the pool,
Mm-hmm.
just depending on how things go for them. And as far as like individually ranking people here, because I think for me, TDK and Poik are clear like one and two.
Yeah.
For ranking people here, there's just so many factors. And at first, like I won't lie, I thought the pool, like the UU pool, was like during the draft was just like dog shit. I
So
thought
did
it
I.
was
So
just
did I.
like gonna be terrible. But
Yeah.
now that I look at it, like there's so many people in tier two because of how competitive and how close I consider some of these people. Um, like on any given day, like Lily could start doing real well and just move up and like have the best record, right? So it could
Yeah.
PDT. Clark did it last year. Piff has been dominating in individuals. Highways won invitational.
Mm-hmm.
Liz has been a mainstay and always, kind of does decently. And so it really just depends on how their performances start, I feel like, because momentum is a huge thing in officials, in
For
my
sure.
opinion.
For sure. Yeah. Definitely agree with 100% of that. And then
Yeah.
moving on to tier 3, we've got, as we mentioned, K Steve and Baby Scarm, who have had good recent results. We mentioned K Steve going like 5-2 in the most recent UPL. Baby Scarm made open semis this year. So they've had recent results. It's just that in terms of just history and pedigree, they're a few steps behind everybody else here, who's more likely to be more comfortable in the builder and in game compared to these two. So these two definitely have some extra weight on their shoulders to surprise the general, Smogon population about what they're capable of, what they can do, how they can perform. So it'll be interesting seeing these two play. I'll be keeping an eye on these two for sure.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I mean, like I just mentioned, the pool is like pretty competitive, right? So just because
Yeah.
they're in the lowest tier doesn't mean that they're just gonna tank and go 1-5, 1-6, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I like being ranked low because the expectations are lower, but they've both had their good results, so they're capable of putting up good results. They're just not as like proven, not even in an official setting, but for me, like playing
In
in
general.
UU, they're just
Yeah.
like not as proven as the other players. So
They're just
they're like
very
clear cut.
volatile, I think is the word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why they're like tier lower for me than everyone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, and I think like I know we didn't necessarily order everyone like 1 to 10, but now that I'm looking at the list,
Yeah.
I think it's like somewhat close. Like I would have TDK and Pollock as the two top ones.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Probably TDK first because of his invitational run, and I know I just found out recently that like last year or like this year, I forgot what it was. He won like every single PL. His team won every single PL. So like the
Oh
diversity in
yeah.
the plane is there,
Yeah.
which is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have Casey and BB Skarma as bottom two. And for the most part, I think like tier two looks fine to me ordered. Like I could like
Yeah.
maybe shift Lily up a bit and like Piff and Highways maybe, but I think for the
Mhm.
most part it's pretty close
It
to
is.
what I would probably rank 1 to 10.
It is oddly close. Like these, what is it, 6 players? Like I would, if any of these 6 players were facing each other in any given week, like I'd probably, I know it's taboo at this point, but in predictions I'd bold like the VS. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
In most cases, 'cause, it's really tough to sort out, who necessarily stands over the other in this tier. But like you
Yeah.
said, it's all going to be momentum based. Whoever, um, strikes gold in the builder and is on top of the trends and asserts their dominance early and sees it
Yeah,
through until
definitely.
the end of the tournament. It's all going to be about that. That's what these tours
I think
are about.
I think SSU right now for sure like rewards the player who's not willing to take a risk or willing to take a risk, so not scared to take a risk
Mm-hmm.
in the builder,
Yeah.
but then also in the player or in the game, because you have a lot of players like I know Adam's not in the pool, but Adam has like the same kind of style to him and to his teams, but he's also not scared to. So like it makes it easier, like for me at least personally, to prep for him
Yes.
than for someone like I don't know, whoever like Piff for example.
Mm-hmm.
But
Piff, Highways,
in
yeah,
game,
people like them.
yeah, but in game, regardless of whatever team he brings, Adam's never scared to like make the necessary plays or take a risk, which goes a long way in general, but also with how the tier is right now. So you got to be willing to make risk in both the builder and while you're playing,
Mm-hmm.
um, because yeah, I think that's for sure gonna dictate in a tier like UU who's gonna do well this tournament.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed on that point. These EU games are going to be wild. Can't wait until week one rolls around because we're definitely going to see some random mon just snowball out of control and just take over the game every week, every game rather. Because that's just the state of UU. It's a very wide open tier.
It happens
Where
every
it's-
tournament, right?
Yeah, it's especially impossible to try to go with that ideal of covering everything with one build. So
Yeah.
like you said, the risks that people are going to take are definitely going to be interesting to see. Like that whole mental game is going to be really fun to watch.
Yeah. And the last thing I want to mention about risk, like I think a really good example is like Highways and KM last year with their sub Gera that we mentioned. It's
Yeah.
like a lot of people weren't like sometimes you drop like removal on stuff like HO for Galarian Moltres, for example. But the thought of like not at the time the thought of like not putting boots on a flying type mon was like something
Foreign,
that hadn't even crossed my mind
sinful,
outside of
right?
HO.
Yeah,
But then they made something like that work, and I was slapping gear on like every single team, right?
Yeah.
So it's like risks like that where you're like, okay, well normally this is what people would do to Gyarados or whatever mon, but I'm gonna try like this new set that might like potentially be crazy and try something a little more unconventional, and then have it like see 3 or 4 uses next week. Like that's really what I'm excited to try and look for this tournament.
taking a standard, boiling it down to its atoms, reconstructing it, into something cooler.
Yo,
But yeah, there you have it. It's a little weird way to rank things, but I'd much rather do it this way than just standard 1 through 10. Even though this kind of resembles just that, but again, I think this is a much more fluid way to do it with this year's pool.
mm-hmm.
So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. This weekend or whenever week one goes up, we'll look at the initial matchups and we'll try to get predicts done as well. We'll try to make this a recurring sort of U coverage thing that we have going on here. So stay
I
tuned
think we're shooting
for
for
more
Sundays, right?
Sundays.
Hopefully.
Hopefully,
Yeah.
hopefully, if everything adds up. So yeah, thanks for bearing with us. Until then, see you guys later. Thanks for tuning in.
See you guys.